I didn't start training leg locks until I was about a blue belt, and my only regret was that I didn't start training them earlier. So today we're covering leg locks and why I believe you should start training them right now. Let's jump in. If you've been training jiu-jitsu for a little while, you've probably heard a famous jiu-jitsu practitioner say, why ignore 50% of the body, in reference to attacking the legs. Now, if you know who said that, drop it in the comments. You get extra credit. Once I heard that, I really bought into it. I came into jiu-jitsu as a wrestler, so I was highly upper body focused. I relied on strength and athleticism. Once I started learning leg locks, I realized not only are you giving yourself more options for attacks, but you're giving yourself more access to other positions, like back takes off leg attacks. And even though learning how to attack the lower half of the body can feel like learning a new language, much like anything in jiu-jitsu can be, once you go down that path, you really realize how many options were at your disposal that you weren't capitalizing on. We can take myself, for example. I come with a wrestling background, I'm relatively strong and athletic, and I do like upper body attacks, but there have been so many times where I've tried upper body attacks on an opponent and they just weren't working. And the second I switch to attacking the legs, all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot of success because I've practiced these, I've gotten to learn them, and not because I'm good at them. I'm by no means a leg lock master, but learning these leg attacks really open up your options when dealing with a tough opponent, especially if your upper body stuff isn't working, which is a nice segue into number two. It levels the playing field against bigger, stronger opponents. Even as a wrestler back in my high school days, I never liked going against guys who were taller than me. I always saw a lot of success going against guys who were shorter. There was something challenging about taller guys for me where it changed leverage points. The center of gravity is a little bit different. I just struggled with that, right? And that difficulty transferred into jiu-jitsu for me until I started learning leg attacks. And I just want to take a quick second to give my sponsor, X Martial, a shout out. X Martial does more for the community than any other brand out there. They sponsor over 300 athletes of all levels, and they even work with kids to help them on their martial arts journey. They've given away over $10,000 in gear in 2023. So if you want to look as good as me and probably even better, get over to X Martial now and start your shopping. They're always running some kind of a deal. You can also use my discount code IRONWILL to save yourself some money. All right, well, I think that covers it. Let's jump back to the video. Personally, I've just found it a lot easier to get into leg attacks against a taller opponent. I find that their center of gravity is a little bit higher. There's more leg to attack. I think obviously there's a tipping point. You know, you go against someone who's 6'8", extremely tall. It's probably going to change the game a little bit, but for the most part, you know, me being an athlete who's 5'11", I'm not the biggest guy out there. So leg attacks have really helped level the playing field, and not just with taller guys, but stronger guys. You have to remember that our legs are really strong in a pushing movement. So squat, leg press, you can see guys put up really big numbers in this way, but it doesn't necessarily matter how much this person can press with their legs when just the way a tree branch is weakest at its end, I can grab the end of your leg and move that across my waist and get into an inside heel hook with relatively low amounts of effort because your opponent is not going to be strong in that way. So while pressing exercises tend to be the strongest movement our legs are capable of, adduction and abduction tend to be the weakest movements that our legs are capable of, which is the reason why it's so easy to take a foot, move it across your waist, and get into a position of advantage in terms of leg lock attacks. Just another reason, despite the learning phase, leg locks become so worthwhile because they work great on guys I find to be taller than me, but not just taller, also stronger. And all it really takes to know what I'm saying is true is to go against someone who's smaller than you, who happens to be good at leg locks. You know, I'm 5'11", 205 pounds right now, and I've gone against guys who are way smaller than me, but are vicious leg lock attackers. And then you start to realize how vulnerable your legs are if you don't know how to defend this stuff. And that's just another benefit of learning leg attacks. You start learning the offense. Guess what comes next? The defense. We all need the defense. Even if you are at a school that doesn't like to show leg locks, it's always good to know the defense for these things, because if you're going to compete, depending on what belt you're at, you will run into opponents who like to attack the legs. It's just unavoidable at this point. So if you're not learning leg attacks because your school doesn't like to show them, at least talk to your instructor about learning the defense to these, because it's always good to know how to defend your legs. Number 3, I believe that it helps teach the finesse of jiu-jitsu. You know, like I said, I came from a wrestler background, so I was very aggressive in my early days at jiu-jitsu. I was very much trying to force everything, and I think this is kind of a common occurrence when it comes to white belts being brand new. We learn techniques, we learn submissions, and we want to force those, right? Learning and being successful with leg locks will require a bit of strategy and finesse. And once you start going down that road, it really, at least I found, started transferring into other parts of my jiu-jitsu. I stopped focusing on strength and I started focusing on technique. I started focusing on setups a bit more. I started focusing on strategy and tactics rather than trying to force everything. And can you learn this lesson in jiu-jitsu without leg attacks? Yes, I'm sure you can. But for me, it was that catalyst I needed to really send home the idea that finesse, strategy, technique really make your jiu-jitsu game a lot more effective. Now, those of you that have been following me for a while know I'm a fan of strength. You know I'm a fan of athleticism, and I will tell you all day, I think that both play a big factor in jiu-jitsu, but if you can have strength, athleticism, and the finesse, the technique, you really become a major problem on the mats. Number 4, it prevents boredom. It gives you something else to pursue in your jiu-jitsu journey. Now, I'll never forget being like a 2-stripe blue belt, feeling like I've seen it all, right? That to me is just the most insane thought that a blue belt could have, but I unfortunately felt that way. And I think I was just becoming a little bored with what I was learning. And once I started to dive into the world of leg locks, it reignited my love for jiu-jitsu. It really proved to me how much I don't know. Jiu-jitsu is meant to be practiced over a long-term period of time. I mean, look at the belt system. It's one of the slowest, if not the slowest, progressing belt system in all of martial arts. This is not something that you fly through. So if you're not keeping yourself entertained, you're not giving yourself new goals and new things to learn, jiu-jitsu can become old. It can become boring, and that happens to a lot of people. And one of my theories on the blue belt blues, you know, if you've never heard of this, people get their blue belt and then they disappear. I think part of that comes from boredom. I think part of that comes from feeling like you know more than you do. And I'm truly embarrassed to say that that's how I used to feel, but you know, I think that's something that a lot of people go through, and it's just one of those things that no one wants to mention because it is a little embarrassing, especially when you realize how much there is out there to learn in jiu-jitsu. So if you are someone who's growing a little bored in your jiu-jitsu journey and you haven't taken a dive into leg locks yet, I highly recommend you do that. Under the umbrella of jiu-jitsu, it truly is like learning another language. It's completely different than upper body attacks. And for me, at least, it really revitalized my enjoyment for the martial art. Now, keep in mind, I'm not telling you to go against your coach or your professor or your sensei's wishes. If you train at a school that doesn't like leg locks or they don't show leg locks to white belts, it's for a reason, right? This is my personal experience with leg attacks. Like I said earlier, wished I would have started earlier. And the whole reason for that is I'd just be further along if I started earlier, right? Obviously, with things like heel hooks, you don't really feel the pain until it's too late, which makes these dangerous. Also, you know, if you're going against a white belt and they roll the wrong way, they could blow their own knee out. I'm extremely careful when doing things like heel hooks to lower belts, because if they do roll the wrong way, you have to let go in time or you're going to hurt this person in a way that could change their life forever. So leg attacks are not something to take lightly, right? There's a lot of responsibility, and the urge and the necessity to be very careful is there. But, and there's a big but, if you can train them safely, I believe that they can be very, very rewarding. So with that being said, drop your comments below. Let me know what belt you were at when you started training leg locks. What are your thoughts on leg locks? Do you guys start training those at blue belts? Do you think it's okay to have white belts train leg locks? Are there certain leg attacks that you would have a white belt do? Maybe like a straight ankle, maybe a toe hold, maybe no heel hooks for white belts, right? Let me know your thoughts on this. Obviously, I'm just one perspective. These are my opinions from my experiences, guys. I always appreciate you adding in yours. So until next time, sometimes backwards, always forwards. I'll see you in the next one.